My wife and I have been together almost 20 years. Our bedroom has been on a slow but gradual decline for the last 15 years. We sat down and had the talk a few months ago, where we hashed out the details of trying to rekindle the spark we once had. One of the main things we both agree upon were the need for date nights as well as other things. Things seem to improving, albeit at only marginally. Again, I'm the one initiating things and 90% of time I get shot down. The usual excuses followed, i.e. too tired, not in the mood, child is awake, he's 18 years old and off doing his own thing, not feeling very well, headache, aches and pains and my personal favorite, we can't, as you've got to be up for work early in the morning. Anyhow, we persisted with the date nights. Out of 9 that I organized over the last 2 months, my wife canceled 7 of them, often without notice. Some even planned weeks in advance, when she'd breeze in after her work shift and announce she was going out with her friends. When I mentioned our date night we'd had planned, she claimed she'd simply forgotten, despite it being marked on the calendar on the fridge. Again, her idea. So on to this weekend. I've spent the last 2 weeks setting up a date night, so picture this: a whole weekend away, a suite in a 5-star hotel, dinner at a fancy Michelin star restaurant, tickets to the theater, something she's always wanted to do, even shopping for some fancy clothes. So I pick her up after work. I've packed some casual clothes for us both, toiletries act. I tell her I've got a surprise plan for her and she immediately starts protesting, saying she has things to do. At this point I'd already checked the calendar and checked with her friends that they didn't have plans for the weekend. I've told her that everything had been taken of and she didn't have to worry. She raised the issue of clothing, but I informed her that I'd got it covered. She seemed to calm down at this point and off we set, although the atmosphere in the car was cold to say the least. Anyway, a few hours later we arrive at the hotel and check in. She seems to cheer up when she sees the suite we have. Her focus returns to me when she asks what I have planned, so I gave her a brief rundown, i.e. shopping, sightseeing, dinner and a show. So we have a light lunch in the hotel restaurant and head out to do some sightseeing. Saturday we headed out shopping ahead of our planned evening. Several hours later we return to the hotel to get ready for dinner. After a while she emerges from the bathroom. I can't put into words how amazing she looked, wearing a dark blue evening gown, matching lingerie, 4-inch heels, jewelry, hair and makeup done perfectly. Let's just say my jaw was on the floor. When she saw me staring, she smiled at me and gave me a twirl, and she looked as stunning as the day we tied the knot. So the dinner went as well as it could, although there was very little conversation between us. We hailed a taxi and headed out to the theater. At least I got a thanks for this part. I'd also arranged for a pair of mutual friends to join us at the theater. They'd managed to secure us our tickets, so we take our seats and being enjoying the show. Just as the intermission starts, I reach over and place my hand over hers to ask her if she likes the show so far. To my surprise, she snatches her hand away from mine like she'd just been bitten by a poisonous snake. She looks me square in the eyes and proceeds to tell me that whatever I was thinking was going to happen tonight when we got back to hotel, I could forget it. Her words almost dripping with disdain and venom, also loud enough so several people around us heard. Our friends didn't know where to look or what to say. My wife told me to shift because she needed to use the bathroom. At this point something inside me just snapped and I got up, apologized to our friends, informing them I was leaving and I hope they enjoy the rest of the show. I'd received a text message from my friends just as I got back to our hotel room, informing me they'd told my wife that I'd left and that she just shrugged her shoulders. Still seething with mounting anger, I decided I was heading home, so I packed my clothes and caught a taxi to the nearest train station and managed to get the last train home. I left a note for my wife along with the car keys so she could get herself home. From the moment I received the text from my friend to the time I got home, I didn't receive a single text message or phone call from my wife to inquire if I was okay or even where I was. This morning I made the decision to relocate to the guest room. I noticed I needed some new bedroom furniture, so I headed down to IKEA. Not my best decision, especially being a Sunday morning. I've given up building flat packs for the day. My wife, however, has asked what the new furniture, but I think she realized when she noticed my clothes and other personal items weren't in the master bedroom. She didn't say anything to me until about an hour ago when she asked me why I was being so childish. I politely explained the previous canceled date nights in favor of her friends and her, in my opinion, completely unnecessary outburst at me during the intermission at the theater. She just shrugged her shoulders again and asked if intimacy was all I was interested in. I brought up the issue of her attitude when I picked her up from work Friday afternoon with the intent of surprising her. She told me to deal with it. I'm currently sat on my rear deck typing this on my laptop while sipping a large glass of JD, debating on my next steps, the anger still bubbling inside me. Oop, thank you for your reply. My son is halfway through his college course ATM. I'm currently treating her with the same cold attitude that she's been showing me. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe TW. Wrongs don't make a right, but I want her to know how it feels firsthand. I've made plans this weekend to head out fishing with an old friend I haven't seen in a few years. I've got no intention of informing her where I'm going nor who with. I'll leave Friday afternoon before she finishes work. I don't know whether she's expecting or simply assuming I'll pick her up from work. The area where we fish had no mobile phone coverage, so for the most part I'll be unreachable. My son has an emergency contact for me if needed. Oop, the closest I got to an apology was that she said okay. I might have overreacted a little. At the minute I'm trying to keep calm, otherwise I'll likely end up doing something that'll come back to bite me on the arse later on down the road. All options are on the table at the minute, so I'm not ruling out divorce. Update 1. Well, where do I start? To begin with, my wife's best friend contacted me and asked what had gone on, as apparently my wife, I'll call her Beth, had told her only part of what happened. So I filled her in on all the gory details. To say she was shocked was an understatement. She proceeded to ask me what I planned to do, considering I was planning a trip to Paris for our anniversary later in the year. I stated that the trip wasn't going ahead, because of her actions at the theater. My darling wife still hasn't apologized for her actions/outburst. She still claims that she may have overreacted slightly, her exact words. Beth promptly called my wife and put her on speakerphone. Beth then proceeded to tear her a new one and, to add insult to injury so to speak, spilled the beans about the proposed trip to Paris for our anniversary. My wife proceeded to gush, saying that she knew I'd get over it as I couldn't say no to her. Her happy mood disappeared when Beth informed her that I'd canceled the trip not 10 minutes ago. As for our home life, since she decided I was moving back into master bedroom, I made the decision to relocate her belongings and personal items into the guest room and installed a lock on the master bedroom door. She kicked up a bit of stink about it, until I gave her the choice: either she's in the guest room or I am. For as it stands at the minute, I'm not prepared to share a room with her for the foreseeable future. I'm also in the process of separating our finances. My name has been removed from our joint accounts and limits on our joint credit cards have been reduced to low limit to prevent spending sprees. She's yet to notice any of these. I've called in a favor from a friend and had the house wired for audio and vision, and so far I've not seen any evidence that she's been cheating on me as others here have suggested. Also, I've got hold of her phone and installed an app there just to confirm my initial findings. I've also turned the house upside down in case she has a second phone stashed away. Again, I've found nothing suspicious. I've also spoken to a solicitor concerning a separation and eventual divorce. I've recently renewed my passport, which when it arrived my wife's first reaction was to ask if the trip to Paris was back on. I replied, or rather snapped back at her, that no, it wasn't back on and the possibility of it ever being planned again was virtually zero. She then proceeded to ask if that was the case, why did I bother renewing my passport? I replied by stating that I have almost 2 months of holiday time saved up from last year and this year, so I'm planning on flying out to California to see an old friend. We've arranged for a 2-week stay and then a few days over in Ohio to catch up with another buddy. Her jaw dropped to the floor. She appeared to be trying to say something but nothing was coming out. Yesterday morning when I got in from work, I found her sitting at the kitchen table along with Beth. By the look on my wife's face, I can only assume that Beth has tore into her again after confirming with our mutual friends who were present at the tea heater. My wife appeared to have been crying by the look of her eyes and face. Beth stood up, looked at me and said that my wife had something to say to me and that she would give us some privacy. I held up my hand to stop her and asked her to remain as witness to ensuing conversation. I'd already set my mobile phone to record just in case. My wife started to speak, which from the part of the first sentence she was able to get out before I cut her off seemed like a proper apology. I don't know if it was a genuine, sincere apology because, like I said, I cut her off before she could finish. I then reached into my bag and pulled out 2 A4 envelopes and placed them on the table in front of her. I then explained the contents on the envelopes. The first one contained a rough draft of a separation agreement drawn up by my lawyer, which would likely end in us getting divorced. At hearing my words, she started bawling her eyes out again. Her friend calmed her down and asked her what she thought I'd do, as she mentioned that during our conversation Beth had picked up on my cold demeanor and tone. Beth also suggested that my wife had pushed me too far when she humiliated me in front of our friends after I went to the trouble of organizing everything, which it turns out by my wife's own admission was something she'd wish I surprise her with. After my wife calmed down, I proceeded to explain that the second envelope contained a list of marriage/personal counselors and instructions for her to choose one. She was then given the ultimatum to choose one of the envelopes. I would be leaving Sunday morning to catch my first flight to the US and she'd got until the time I returned to make the decision, as I refused to be spoken to and treated like I was that night. Add in the fact that she didn't see, and I'm still not sure she does, that her reaction was uncalled for and way over the top. Before she could respond, I told her in no uncertain terms that if she started screaming at me at the second option would be immediately removed from the equation. I'd also reiterated that if I found out she was seeing someone else whilst I was away, option 1 would be selected by default. Update 2. I'm finally back home after having a great time catching up with friends in the US. I turned my phone on after I landed back in the UK and holy hell, I thought it was going to blow up. Messages, voicemails, emails and missed calls, mostly from my wife and a few from friends and family. It turns out the friends we were with at that fateful weekend had informed my parents of what went on, along with a few other mutual friends that had inquired about my well-being since I'd been pretty much radio silent since I left for my trip. The messages from my wife started with the usual empty platitudes, insincere apologies I assume when I didn't give her the satisfaction of responding. The messages became more menacing and darker in nature, almost to the point of threatening. I rang her and told her that I'd landed back in the UK and I'd be home after I made a quick stop off at my mother's house. She seemed overly affectionate and sweet on the phone, almost had me wondering if it was the same person I left when I headed out to the US. So I spoke to my mom, laid out everything that had happened and why I took the trip abroad, and she said that she understood but was considerably upset that I left without telling her in person. I had rang and left a voicemail message for her, unaware that she didn't know how to access it. Mom's really not tech savvy BTW. Anyhow, I get home and my wife practically rugby tackles me the second I'm through the door, again showering me with affection as if nothing had happened at all. I explain that I'm tired from the flight act and all I really want at that moment in time is a long hot shower and some sleep. I walk upstairs and place my suitcase in the spare room just because it was the closer room as I walked up the stairs before getting in TH's shower. My wife doesn't say anything, although I heard her creep up THR stairs and mooch around the landing, even trying THR bathroom door. Finding it locked behind me, she left and went back downstairs. After showering, I collapsed on the bed in the spare room and fell asleep for several hours. After waking up, I went downstairs and sat opposite my wife, who promptly got up, smiled and came and sat on my lap again, being overly affectionate. She made small talk, asking if I'd enjoyed my trip, asking where I'd been and what I'd saw. I whisked her off my lap and sat her down on the sofa next to me and asked her bluntly if she'd made a decision about the 2 envelopes if presented her before I left. She simply scoffed at me and asked if it was really serious because she assumed that I was just being childish and throwing a tantrum. I informed her that I was deadly serious about it and if she'd given it any thought. She just smirked at me and told me to stop being stupid and get over it. My reply was she'd given me her answer and thanks for letting me know where I stand. At which point I rang the solicitor who drew up the 2 sets of papers. She's an old school friend, BTW, and although I hated ringing her one Friday afternoon whilst she was likely with family, she asked me what choice my wife had made. I informed her that I didn't want to discuss it over the phone and could make an appointment next week to discuss it in person and go over my options. She must have anticipated my call because she said she'd penciled me in for a possible meeting Monday afternoon. As I wrote down the appointment time, I caught my wife staring daggers at me and looking so wrecked in the face I thought she might be on the verge of either having a stroke, heart attack or both. After I'd finished the call, I turned to face her and before she had time to say anything I told her she'd made her choice and that I was serious about it. Later I heard on the phone sobbing to her best friend about the situation, asking for help on how she could fix the situation. I couldn't hear the other half of the conversation, but from the sobs my wife was making I can only assume that the advice wasn't what she wanted to hear. So at the moment whilst writing this out, I'm also going through multiple hours of camera footage from the home security system I had installed before I left. Just in case she decided to have some male company over in my absence, if you get my drift. Because as others have replied and suggested, she may have been involved with someone else, and either way I wanted proof. So that's pretty much where I am the moment. Oh, and my staffy won't leave me alone. He keeps looking at me, nuzzling me, trying to sit on my lap, wanting to be fussed. Just asked him if he wanted to go for a walk and he looks like he's about to burst with excitement. Now second story. Weird guy shows up at my parents' house at 1 a.m. looking for me and using details of my life that were valid 20 years ago. Help me figure this out. This happened 3 nights ago and I am going crazy trying to figure it out. I just moved into a new apartment 1 month ago and I am still unpacking and settling in. I have been using my parents' address as my mailing address, who live a few towns over, 20 minutes away, all of my life. 3 nights ago my parents call me at 2 a.m. freaked out and proceed to tell me this story. Apparently at 1 a.m. someone starts banging on their front door and repeatedly ringing their doorbell. My stepdad walks downstairs and opens the door, leaving the front glass door closed and locked. There was a man standing outside, who looked to be in his 30s, with a black hoodie on with the hood pulled up around his face. He didn't have any distinguishing facial features, facial hair or tattoos. The only thing my stepdad said was that he looked to be Hispanic. Neither my stepdad or my mother, who was watching the whole thing out a window, recognized the man. The man says, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I am looking for my full name." My stepdad plays dumb and says, "Who?" The man proceeds to state my full name again and says that my boyfriend is worried because I didn't come home that night. He claims to be a friend of my boyfriend and tells my stepdad that they are both out looking for me, worried because I didn't show up at home. I don't have a boyfriend. I live by myself with my 3 dogs and haven't been in a relationship in the past 5 to 6 months. Here's the weird part. My stepdad asked the guy what boyfriend he was talking about and the man tells him the name of the boyfriend I had when I was in 10th grade, nearly 20 years ago. My boyfriend in 10th grade has a very, very unique Italian name. I've never met anyone with a full name even close to his. He says my high school boyfriend's name a few more times to ensure my stepdad heard him and repeats that they are very worried about me. Is my stepdad sure I'm not inside? At this point my stepdad is weirded out and closes and locks the door in his face. The man does not leave. He lingers in front of my parents' house for the next 10 minutes, smoking cigarettes and talking on the phone. Finally, my parents calls the cops. About 5 minutes before the cops arrive, the man walks down to the dead end on their block and drives away in a silver car. Stepdad was unable to get the license plate. My parents file a police report and nothing else happens. After I hear this story I'm going nuts over the weird details. How would someone know who I dated nearly 20 years ago, and what would the motive be of making up a story that included that weird detail about my past? I have not had contact with the 10th grade boyfriend in over a decade. Yesterday, I decide to message him on a Facebook to see if he has any insight. I tell him the whole story. He's just as confused as I am and claims to have no part in it. I am at a loss. I'm also really freaked out that some strange man is going through that much trouble at 1 a.m. to Lou K for me. Any insights or ideas would be greatly appreciated. No, nothing else weird has happened since then. Update 1. This is really unsettling. If this had happened to me, here's what my first theory would be. My parents also still live in the same house I grew up in. Everyone I went to school with would know the address. It's a nice house and one would assume that there's nice things in it. When I was a teen, I briefly got mixed up with the wrong crowd, who at the time wasn't too bad, but nowadays most of them are addicts and complete low-lives who've done time in jail. If my parents told me this story, I would immediately assume that someone I knew in high school who's now an addict, was casing houses in the neighborhood, or even purposely targeting my parents' house because they already know the layout, and rang the bell to see if anyone was home, and when they answered they had to make up a lie, so they went with that because knowing those details might give them plausible deniability to what their real intention was, robbing the house, and they can just claim they were confused if caught. Update 2. My stepsister, my stepdad's daughter, and her fiancé were at a house party right after the holidays, around early January of this year. While they were there, they started talking to a girl that neither of them knew. After some time talking together, the girl started talking about her ex-boyfriend and how they were going through a really tough time together. They had just recently broke up and she felt really bad because he was a wreck over it. Somehow, it came up that this girl's ex-boyfriend was my 10th grade boyfriend, the one with the really unique Italian name. The whole situation wasn't that big of a coincidence, since I went to high school with my stepsister's fiancé and we have a lot of mutual friends. So it makes sense that they were at a party that would include some people I went to high school with. As soon as my stepsister and her fiancé hear T.S., they both start freaking out, and without revealing too many details, they tell the girl about the whole mystery and how weird it was. As they are telling the story, the girl's face starts to go white and she looks like she's about to cry. My stepsister and fiancé try to console her and ask her what's wrong. The wine/beer had been flowing at this point, so I'm sure everyone was a little tipsy. The girl starts to tell them that a few nights ago, she was sleeping, and someone started banging on her door at, get this, fucking 1 a.m. Just like what happened to me at my parents'. The girl jumps out of bed and says she was absolutely terrified by how loud and aggressive someone was banging on her door. She said she literally thought it was going to break in. The girl has a Ring camera, so looks on her phone. There on the camera, is a guy, in a black hoodie, banging on her door. She obviously pretends like she isn't home and keeps all of the lights off. He continues banging. As she is getting ready to dial 911, the guy stops and leaves. She said she was absolutely terrified. For whatever reason, she didn't end up calling the cops, but may have went to stay with a friend that night or the night after. My stepsister and fiancé are shocked by the details and how similar it is to my story, especially because of the mutual ex-boyfriend we share, except this girl literally just broke things off with him. They asked the girl if she has any idea who the guy is and she said no, but that it definitely is not the actual ex-boyfriend. She said this guy was much taller and heavier than our shared mutual ex. How fucking weird. This mystery is still unsolved and these new details honestly just make my head spin even more. No one else has showed up to my parents' door since the actual incident a year ago. Sounds like Italian name ex-boyfriend might have pissed off some unsavory people who know his dating history. Or he has a weird way of getting back at his ex-girlfriends. Hi all. So a few answers to some questions. 1. 10th grade boyfriend was into drugs when I dated him back in high school. No idea if he continued to use throughout his life or not, but can confirm he is definitely an addict who may or may not be in recovery currently. 2. 10th grade boyfriend has been to my parents' house multiple times. My parents still live in the same house I grew up in, and 10th grade boyfriend has been over many times while we dated in high school. I don't know where he currently lives, but he grew up about 10 minutes away from my parents' house. 3. 10th grade boyfriend and I had a horrific breakup. I met my high school sweetheart while I was dating him and broke up with him in a pretty messed up way. He held a grudge over it all throughout high school and was extremely nasty to me to the point of bullying. At one point, I had to get a security guard to escort me to classes because him and his friends were bullying me so badly. The bullying was only severe for the rest of 10th grade, but he definitely hated me all throughout high school. At one point, he did end up apologizing to me, and explained that he was just heartbroken over me breaking up with him, but at that point, I was way past the point of forgiving him. After graduating high school, we ran into each other maybe once or twice while I was home from college and he was totally cordial and nice with me and we laughed the high school experiences off. 4. I can definitely try reaching out to him on Facebook again and bringing back up this whole mystery with the added updates from his recent ex-girlfriend to see what his reaction is and gauge whether or not he's being truthful in it. I can also ask some mutual high school friends who know him about how he currently is, if he's into any shady shit or not. 5. My stepsis only gave me a first name and description of recent ex-girlfriend from the party. But I can go on 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look for her under his friends, then reach out to her on Facebook Messenger to inquire about Ring footage and ask her more questions, also see if she ever reached out to cops. I agree this is probably the best thing to do if I want more answers, but I agree I need to be careful as I still don't know what is going on here. 6. 10th grade boyfriend does not have a brother, just one younger sister that I remember back from high school. I decided I am going to try and find out the girl's full name so I can look her up on social media. I may even be able to find her with just the first name that I already know from my stepsis telling me. I can go onto 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look in his friend list for a girl with the same first name who looks like she could have been his ex-girlfriend. He may even have pictures with her tagged, so it shouldn't be that hard, unless he wiped his social media clean of her after they broke up. When I am able to find her, I'm going to reach out to her and try and get some answers. I think this is the safest route since I still don't know 10th grade boyfriend's role in this, and I did already ask him once and he claimed to have no part in it or know anything, which may or may not have been a lie. Based on how scared my stepsis said this girl was, I'm betting she'll be willing to talk to me about it since we share the experience.